Hello and welcome to episode 85 of 10,000 Stitches podcast, a weekly chit-chat all about the joys of knitting. My name is Andy and thanks for joining me today. As you can see, my background has changed a little bit. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But if you were looking for me on the interwebs, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Ravelry as Purlbug, P-U-R-L-B-U-G. You can find my blog at thepurlbug.com, and then we have the 10,000 Stitches podcast group on Ravelry. If you're looking for links to anything that I mentioned today, if you're watching this on the embedded video on the Ravelry thread or the blog post, everything will be linked right below the video. If you are watching this on YouTube, in the description box below the video, there will be a link to the blog post, and then you can go there, and again, everything will be linked there right below the video. I'm currently recording on, Sunday, January 7th, I believe, and this episode will go up on Tuesday, January 9th. Yeah, it's going to be a pretty standard episode today. I have a finished object to show off, some works in progress. Not really much to talk about in terms of coming up next. We'll talk about the current knit along. Maybe I'll come up with the question of the week. I didn't think that far ahead. And actually, I just came up with the question of the week, so hopefully I remember that by the time I get to there. But and then we'll do some chit chat. So probably a little bit shorter episode this week, I think, but who knows? So let's talk really quickly about why my background has changed. So those of you who watched Vlogmas actually know this corner right here. This is where I would sit at the end of every video in that red IKEA chair, and I would close out the video each night. So I used to have my chair here. When Wesley moved out, I moved everything in my apartment around to kind of, just make it my own. And because, I got rid of some of the furniture that we had when it was two of us living here. And now that it's just one of me living here, things don't need to necessarily be the same. And this desk was a new addition when Wesley moved out. But I had it in the other room, in my bedroom. And I never really used it in there because my bedroom is on the street side of the apartment, and this is the living room / kitchen, which is on the back side of the apartment away from the street. So this is the room that tends to be a little bit quieter. It also gets the afternoon sunlight. So this is just the room where I tend to spend most of my time. So before, I would spend most of my time sitting in that IKEA chair in this corner, which was fine. But, if I wanted to watch something on my computer or something, I would either have it on my lap or I would put it on the chair for my kitchen table. And just no matter what, it was not really a very good situation because if I had it on my lap, I was kind of, hunched over and everything. So I figured why not put the chair in the bedroom and it will become sort of a dedicated reading chair. And then I brought the desk in here, and now this provides somewhere for me to put my computer, and it puts it in a spot that I actually want to spend time with it. As opposed to in the bedroom where I just didn't want to sit at it. So I'm trying it out. We're going to see how it works. But so far, I think I really like it. This is going off of, 3 hours of having it like this because I just did this morning, but we'll see. So that's the homemakery kind of stuff. Let's talk about the knitting, shall we? So finished objects. I have one finished object for you guys, and this is a project that you will be seeing for the first and last time today. Because I hadn't really been planning on making this, but my dad's birthday is this month, and I didn't know what to, I feel like the older you get, the harder it is to buy birthday gifts or come up with birthday gifts even for your parents or even siblings, because it's like, as people get older, they tend to just get the things that they want or need, so it makes it harder to buy gifts for them. Without, spending a ton of money, of course. So I was trying to think of something that I thought my dad would like, and I decided I would knit him a hat. I've knit him socks in the past, and so I decided I would knit him a hat, and the hat that I made him is I think it's the 1898 hat, and it's a free pattern, really simple pattern, really great pattern. I'll just show it to you, how about? So this is what the finished hat looks like. So it looks like this. It's coming up a little bit dark on camera because it's a really dark blue yarn. This is actually the same yarn that I used to knit Wesley's laptop case out of. It's that 100% acrylic yarn, which is great because my dad's actually allergic to wool. So it's good that I had some of this left over to make this hat for him. And it's an ear flap hat. You can see the little, let's see if I can hold it up. There we go. The little ear flaps on the side. And the way that this hat is worked is really interesting. So you actually knit this entire brim piece flat in garter stitch. I think you guys can kind of see that. And so you knit this entire thing flat, and it's double thick. You can see on the inside it's nice and thick and squishy. And because it's, you know, garter stitch and it's double thick, like it is just super thick and warm around this band part, which it's meant to be, because it's meant to like really keep your ears and your forehead really warm and cozy. And then once you're done with that, you seam it in the back, and then you pick up your stitches and you knit the rest of the hat up from the brim. But the rest of the hat knits up super fast. It's really the brim that takes the most time. But I think the finished effect is totally worth it. So I will put this on so you guys can see what it looks like. So it's meant to fit very snugly. Like, it's not meant to be a slouchy hat. I think of this as like a really good hat for men because it's no frills and it's just about like utility. So it fits really snugly, you know, all the way around, and it has the ear flaps. You can see the ear flaps, and they really come over the ear, and then it fits pretty low in the back as well. And yeah, and it fits close to the top of the head. And I think it's a great pattern, and I plan to make more of these. It's knit using worsted weight yarn. Like I said, I used a 100% acrylic, but if I were knitting it for anyone else, I would probably use like a wool or a wool blend. The pattern calls for a US 7. I actually used a US 7. I probably could have gone up a needle size, and if I were making it with someone who I knew had an especially big head, I probably would go up a size to a size 8. Sorry, a US 7 is a 4.5 millimeter needle. But the US 7 worked fine. I think my head's about the same size as my dad's head, so I'm not concerned about it fitting him. Plus, like I said, it's supposed to fit fairly snug. But yeah, I loved everything about the pattern. It's really cool because, you know, like I said, you knit the brim flat, and then you kind of fold it over on itself to make this double thick brim. And sort of one of the design features is you have this sort of edging that you knit sort of in the middle of your piece as you're knitting it flat, and it forms this really nice, neat edge for when you fold it over. And yeah, the only changes I made to the pattern is so in the pattern, right, so you start doing the crown decreases, and it'll be like, okay, you know, decrease every however many stitches, knit 2 rows, decrease however many stitches, knit 2 rows, decrease however many stitches, knit 1 row, you know, kind of the normal way that hats do their decreases. And so it came to a point where, now if I'm going backwards from the last row, right, so the last row is knit 2 together all the way around. The row prior to that is knit 1, knit 2 together all the way around. And the pattern has a knit 1 plain row in between that knit 1, knit 2 together and the previous decrease row. I got rid of that last knit 1 row plain. I got rid of the last time that happened because I've had instances where hats can wind up with like the little pointy point at the top, and I don't like that. So I got rid of that, and it made the top nice and round, as you can see. So if you are another person that gets annoyed by that, maybe try decreasing the very last plain knit row in the decreases, and it worked for me. So, you know, yeah, so that is my only finished object this week. Like I said, I wasn't planning on making this, and it knit up super fast, and I showed it to Wesley, and now he wants one. So we'll see if I can get my hands on some yarn to make him one before spring. But yeah, so that highly recommended if you're looking for a pattern for like a guy who, you know, just wants a hat that's going to be nice and warm and cozy, but not too many frills. Highly recommend. So that's the 1898 hat. So that's my only finished object, and let's move on to works in progress then. Let's go with the sort of the most exciting one, which is my exploration station. This is definitely the thing I've devoted the most time to this past week, and I'm currently on my very last wedge of sort of the first wedge section. And I think I mentioned this last week, but I am adding an extra 2 wedges to that section because I'm knitting this with a smaller size of needles. Sorry, this is the Exploration Station by Stephen West. And yeah, so I'm knitting this with a US 4, which is a 3.5 millimeter needle, as opposed to the US 6, which is a 4 millimeter needle that the pattern calls for. So I was afraid my wedge section was going to wind up a little bit small, so I decided to add an extra 2 wedges. So I'm currently on the 8th wedge, which will be my last one. And kind of once you get the hang of how the wedges are made, it's not hard to like figure out how to do additional ones just based on how they're worked in the pattern. Plus, the wedges in this pattern are worked exactly the same way as they are in the dotted rays. So boy, do I know how to make these wedges by now. But yeah, this is what it looks like so far. So like I said, I'm on my very last one. So this is basically how this entire wedge section is going to look. So I think I mentioned this last week, but I am not doing the wedges in sort of the color order that is specified in the pattern, because the way the pattern defines the colors is your color that makes these sort of dividing stripes, that's color A, and then you have B, C, and D. So I think the way the pattern goes is it goes, you know, B, C, D, B, C, D, and those are your 6 wedges that are in this section. I decided not to do that, so I have one orange wedge here, sort of right at the beginning. My first wedge was orange, and then my 6th wedge was orange. And then the other ones are alternating between my 2 sort of green colors, which, I don't know, I think it's an interesting sort of visual, and I like it, and I think it just, I don't know. I didn't really just want to do like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 kind of a thing, so I thought this would be interesting. So yeah, like I said, I'm on my last wedge, which will take quite a while because I have a fair number of stitches on the needles right now. And then after that, I get to the brioche section, and then there's the slip stitches section, and then there's the chevron sort of lace edging. So I'm planning on doing the brioche section in this sort of brown that I'm my color A and orange. And then the slip stitches section I will do in the 2 greens. Oh, and then there's another section, I think, before you get to the edging. So, and I haven't quite decided on my colors for that last section yet, but yeah, I'm super excited about this. And I thought I would talk for just a brief moment about sort of modifying patterns, because, you know, if you've been around for a little while, you know that I do this a lot, where I will take a pattern and I'll decide like, but I want to do it a different way. And I've had people ask me before kind of how, like what my process is like for this. And it's hard to sort of speak generally about like how I figure out how to do these sorts of things, because every pattern is a little bit different. But like with this pattern, you know, deciding to add in the 2 extra wedges, a lot of like the process of figuring out how to do this is saying, okay, is there some sort of, you know, algorithmic way that these wedges are formed that I can then extend to bigger wedges, which there is. Once you kind of figure it out, it's pretty easy to say like, oh, okay, this is how I just make another wedge, you know. So that's sort of the first step, is like, is there an algorithm that I can learn and adapt to, you know, make this different? Then the other thing is looking at how does this fit into the rest of the pattern. So like I said, after you finish the wedges, there's a brioche section. And looking at the brioche section, as far as I can tell, the only thing that's important is that you have an odd number of stitches. So it's like, okay, then that means all I have to worry about in terms of finishing up this last wedge is just making sure that I wind up with an odd number of stitches. And even if I wind up with an even number of stitches, I can kind of just fudge it. You know, it's like, oh, you just knit 2 together then, and now you have an odd number of stitches. So I feel like a lot of sort of how I do this process is just, like I would just call it knitter's intuition, but it's like, it's having been doing this for a while and having knit a lot of patterns and kind of understanding how patterns work, I think is really the key to being able to adapt patterns to then fit your needs. You know, and like I don't design patterns, so it's not like you have to be like a pattern designer to be able to modify other people's patterns. It's just, you know, having knit enough patterns and knowing how they work to be able to you know, modify something that's already there. Hopefully that made sense, and maybe it made helped someone. But yeah, I'll try and talk more about this as I sort of come to these things, you know, how I modify patterns and sort of like the things that I think about as I'm doing that. So for this one, it was mostly in terms of like doing the extra wedges. It was, is there an algorithm to how the wedges are done? And you know, what do I need to do to be able to move on to the next section, which was just have an odd number of stitches. Okay, you know, like that's not a big deal. If it was like, oh, you need to have a multiple of X number of stitches plus 2 or something, well, now that would be more complicated and I would be more hesitant to do it. But just saying, oh, you need an odd number or an even number of stitches is like, psh, that's fine, right? That's easy. So yeah, that's the exploration station. And I haven't quite decided. I think I might take this to be my train knitting on my way to Vogue Knitting Live, because I'm taking a train up to New York City on Friday, and that's a 5-hour train. I think it's actually longer than that. It's probably like 6 or 7 hours. It's a fairly long train ride, so I might take this to be my train knitting. It's not like on-the-go travel knitting, but I figure kind of once I'm on the train, I'll get settled in. And then it's not like it's the same as knitting at home, so I might take this to work on. We'll see. Yeah, that's my first work in progress. And then my second work in progress is my granny stripe blanket. I know I said I wasn't going to show this every week, and I won't. I just figured I'd show it this week because I've, you know, been working on it a fair amount, and yeah. So I think I mentioned, right, so this is the granny stripe blanket. I don't know how many I chained on. It's roughly the size of a full-size bed, but this is how it looks now. As you can see, I've added some rows to it. I'm pulling out stitches because I'm pulling on my yarn. This is great. Way to go. But that's what I love about crochet, is that it's like, it's not a big deal if you pull out a couple of crochets, because it's like, psh, whatever, right? Like, you don't really have those live stitches to worry about. So that's the nice thing about like crochet, and what I really like about this blanket project. But yeah, as you can see, it's probably, I think, doubled maybe in size since you guys last saw it. It's very scrappy. I think I mentioned last time that I am just joining all of my yarns together using a magic knot, which actually I'm at a join right now. But what I decided to do over this past week was, instead of kind of picking out my scraps as I go and trying to figure out which one comes next, and I'm all tangled here somehow, I figured I would go ahead and wind up a couple of magic knot balls just ahead of time. So this is one that I've done. You can kind of see like there's a little bit of crazy Zauberball in there. And then I have two more. So this is another one that I've done. You can see the different yarns in that one. And then this is another one that I just did this morning. And these are basically about the total of my scraps. But I'm thinking I have some, you know, like 50-gram skeins, like single 50-gram skeins. So, you know, it's not like they're very useful for making socks or anything. I have some 50-gram skeins of like self-striping yarn or something like that. And I might wind up just working entire 50-gram skeins into this thing too, if I don't necessarily see myself wanting to use them for something else, but I don't necessarily just want to like throw them out or something. You know, I might just work entire 50-gram skeins into this. Who knows? Who knows? That's kind of what I like about it, is I'm just going to decide what I want to do as I go on. So yeah, that's that. I just figured I'd check in really quick and show you guys that. I don't know when you'll see it again, probably once I feel like I've made enough progress. So I guess here's the thing to remember, is that the point I'm at right now is where I've just started to put in, this is actually some of the leftovers from my dad Ray's. So yeah, that's where I am right now. Maybe I'll try and remember to put like a progress keeper or something on it, so I can actually remember that by the time I show you guys this next. But yeah, that's that. And then my last work in progress is, again, something you guys haven't seen yet because I just cast it on yesterday. And this is my OCTOMITTS. So I know I mentioned these last week as something that was going to be coming up. And this is a pattern by SPILLYJANE, and it's a pattern that I've been wanting to make for a long, long time, but I just haven't because it's a color work pattern, and as we know, I'm not so great at color work, so I'm giving it another shot. And this sort of ties in with my what's coming up next, because the next thing I want to make is the Stray Moi, which is a big color work cardigan. So I figured, okay, my color work skills aren't good, let's get a little bit of practice before I embark on this giant cardigan, which also involves steeking and stuff like that. So it's like, let's try and keep the number of new things down to a minimum. So I started my first mitt yesterday, and I'm one chart repeat into it. So this is what it looks like. I think I mentioned this before. These are basically, they have little octopuses on them, so you can see the little octopus on there. And this is the palm side. I am making these as fingerless mitts, so I am one chart repeat in, and now I will start working a thumb gusset, which I sort of added into the pattern because it just normally has an afterthought thumb. So I've sort of added in a thumb gusset. We'll see how well it goes. But yeah, I'm just about at the point where I will start, you know, increasing for the thumb gusset. But yeah, so this is my little octopus. My colorwork skills are still not very good. I've normally been working this actually flipped inside out. I just flipped it right side out so that I could see how it looked right now. Mostly the areas where my stitches are not very even is along the edges here. And I'm not gonna try and like get really zoomed, but I mean, even from here, you can see that like those stitches are really wonky along the edges, and hopefully that'll fix itself with some blocking. I don't know, but Otherwise, like the rest of my color work has been okay. And I think a lot of that is because I'm working this on needles way bigger than what I would normally use for sock yarn. I'm working this on a US 2, which is what the pattern calls for. And that is a 2.75 millimeter needle. I know some people, you know, knit socks on US 2s. I probably wouldn't unless I was maybe working with like one of the really thick Patton's Croy yarns. Because like for me, it just is a little bit too big of a needle for fingering weight yarn and socks. But I think for color work, it's helping because it's making me knit a little bit looser than I normally would otherwise. So yeah, that's mostly that for this. These are being worked with my the same 2 yarns that I used for the Undine socks. So you guys have seen these a lot of times before. Those are both hand-dyed yarns that I did on 100% BFL base. And the only other thing I will mention about this right now is, so you can see this octopus head here. This is about, oh, how many? 1, 8, 9? I think 9 stitches wide at its widest point. So that's a pretty long float that you'd have to be carrying across the back for, you know, that huge chunk. And so I decided to try a method called, I think, ladderback jacquard, and for dealing with those like really long floats, kind of like a way to secure the floats without catching the floats, because when you catch floats in color work, you can wind up with little blips of color showing through on the right side of your work, and you don't want that, obviously. So this was sort of a way to catch those floats invisibly along the back. And I learned this via a video by OCTOMITTS, so I will link that video. It's a pretty simple method, and it's especially simple if you've ever done double knitting before, which I have. But yeah, it's just sort of a method of catching the floats, and I will show you guys what that looks like on the back. So this is what those floats look like on the back. I know it's probably not in great focus right now, but yeah, that's what those look like. And it just basically forms sort of this spine of, they're technically knit stitches, like you're double knitting a stitch. So these are knit stitches on the wrong side. So definitely something to look into if you are doing color work and you maybe have a section which has very long floats in it. This is a great way to secure your floats without worrying about them being visible on the other side. So I will, like I said, definitely link to that video because I thought it was really great, and he really does a good job of explaining what he's doing and showing what he's doing. So highly recommend. But otherwise, yeah, I'm just gonna keep going with these. It's definitely slow going because I knit my color work two-handed, so I hold the non-dominant color in my right hand and I hold the dominant color in my left hand, and it's very brain intensive for me, and it's just kind of hand intensive too because it's making my hands do things that they're not used to doing. So I imagine these are going to go pretty slow, but I was very excited to get them started, and I'm very excited to be working on them because it's a process that I want to get better at, and it's a product that I really want. So I'm pretty excited. So that's my last work in progress. You know, I'm trying to keep the number of ongoing whips to be pretty small. So, so yeah, that's a good number for me. Like a small project, a big project with the exploration station, and then sort of just a scrappy project with the granny strip blanket. And like I said, so the next thing I'm planning on making is the Straymoy, which is that big colorwork cardigan. That one I don't have the yarn for yet. It calls for Cascade Eco, I believe, and I am going to use Cascade Eco just because with it being color work, and I think it's knit from the bottom up, and I don't want to try and like fuss around substituting in a different yarn. I'm just going to use exactly the yarn that's asked for in the pattern, not the same colors, but you know, I'm going to use the same type of yarn that's asked for in the pattern. I'm going to swatch like nobody's business to make sure I'm getting gauge because I really want it to fit. But yeah, that's one that I need to find a source for that yarn and get it ordered. But you know, that'll probably happen, I'm thinking maybe towards the end of the month, probably. And if it turns out that like I just can't source the yarn before I finish up these other projects, then maybe I'll push the Straymoy off and start something else in the meantime. But that is the next thing that I have planned, and I'm super excited for it. So yeah, so I guess that's kind of it. I haven't done any dyeing. It's been a weird week, so which I'll talk about in the chit chat, but it's just been a weird week for me. So I've mostly just been working on the exploration station, and I was working on that hat. The hat actually was something that I was knitting at work. So when I was at work, I was just knitting on the hat and then working on the exploration station when I've been at home. So yeah. Let's talk, where am I? Let's talk about the knit along. I had to think about like what order things come in. So we're like a week into our current knit along right now. The threads are up. As a reminder, the sort of big theme for this knit along for January and February is winter, which breaks down into a color theme of blue and a technique theme of either stranded color work or mosaic color work. I don't know if we have any finished objects yet, but I have been seeing lots of, whips in the chatter thread, which is really fun. And yeah, feel free to post about your whips in the chatter thread. If you have any questions about does something, qualify, like sometimes people ask like, is this yarn, blue enough or something like that? Feel free to pop those in the chatter thread. I generally try and answer questions that are in there pretty quickly. But yeah, I'm excited to see finished objects as they come in, especially some of the colorwork things that people have been putting in the chatter thread. I'm super excited to see how they turn out. And I don't have a prize for that yet. Like I said, I might pick something up at Vogue Knitting Live if I can find something that's like really special there. Otherwise, I will try and for sure have a prize by the end of the month, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet. So yeah, that's the knit along stuff. And then question of the week. So this question of the week is not a knitting specific question of the week. Speaking of, my question of the week last week was, about like, what is your favorite thing that you knit in 2017? And thank you to everyone who responded to that. And especially those of you who responded on Ravelry and like linked to the projects or posted pictures from the projects. That was really cool to be able to see like just like the whole scope of like what people chose as like their favorite thing that they knit in 2017. So that was really great. Thank you for the feedback on that. So this one is not knitting specific. It's actually about this desk, sort of. So I mentioned that I moved this desk out here because, I just wasn't using it when it was in my bedroom and all of that. The other reason is because I tend to be one of those people who moves furniture around a fair amount if I can, because I just get restless sometimes, like in the space that I'm in. And moving furniture is a heck of a lot cheaper and easier than moving apartments. So, I will frequently sort of move furniture around to try different things out, try different layouts, and just to kind of make the space feel different. And I blame a lot of this on my parents because they did this when I was growing up, where they would just rearrange all the furniture in our living room, or, me and my brothers would sometimes switch around the bedrooms that we were in. Or something like that. And then that carried over into when I was in undergrad. I would frequently rearrange all my stuff in my dorm room. I would loft my bed or de-loft my bed or move my desk to a different spot in the room. And I did this in grad school too, and I do it here because I think for me, it helps to like deal with that just general feeling of restlessness. So yeah, I really like it. So my question is, are you one of those people? Because I know not everyone is like this. Because Wesley's parents are not like this. Like, I think their house has been basically the same, more or less. At least the downstairs part of it has been basically the same since he and I started dating, which is totally fine, right? They have found a way that works for their house and kind of all of their furniture works in there. And that's fine. And why mess with it if you found a way that works and you like it? For me, it's mostly that I get to the point where I just dislike everything and I want everything to move. So my question is, which of those are you? Are you the kind of person who, every 6 months or a year or so you feel the itch and you just have to move all the furniture in your house to a different spot? Or are you the type of person who's kind of like, once I found a good spot for everything, I don't feel like moving it? Or I guess maybe there's a third type of person who keeps all their furniture in the same place, but like redecorates with like accessories, like, like throw pillows and like knickknacks and stuff like that. Are you one of those people? I'm not one of those people just because, one, I have a horrible time picking out like knickknacks and accessories. Like my brain just can't really handle that. Like, I'm not good at that. And two, I just don't have the money right now to spend on like redecorating that way every year. So for me, moving furniture, like I said, is cheaper and easier because it's free to move the furniture I already have. But yeah, I guess which one of those types of people are you? So that's my question of the week this week. yeah, and I guess that's going to be it for the knitting type stuff. So if that's all you were here for, thank you very much for hanging out. I've mentioned this before, but I am going to be going to Vogue Knitting Live this next weekend, which is January 12th through the 14th. So I will be vlogging that trip. I don't know if I'll have a regular episode next week or not, but I will for sure have a vlog to put up of Vogue Knitting Live. I'm super duper excited for it. I should be there Friday evening. Like, I get up to New York, I think about 5 o'clock on Friday, and then I leave about 1 o'clock on Sunday. So, and not very much time, not even 48 hours in New York City, which is kind of a bummer because it's also my first trip to New York City and I'm super excited and I want to do all the things, but I'm excited nonetheless. And so if you're going to be at Vogue Knitting Live and you see this before then, let me know, or hit me up on like Instagram or something, because I'd love to meet people there. So yeah, super excited about that, and be on the lookout for a vlog of that next week. But otherwise, yeah, that's it for the knitting stuff. So if that's all you were here for, thanks very much, and I'll see you next week in some capacity or another. Otherwise, I'm going to save this clip, make myself some coffee, and we can talk a little bit about what this past week was like, because like I said, it was kind of a weird week. So yeah, if you want to hear about that, stick around and we'll talk about that in just a second. Sadly, I was a little slow about getting my coffee going, so no coffee for the chit chat. It's actually brewing right now, so you guys will probably hear it as it sputters and finishes up, but instead I'll just work on my granny stripe blanket. So why was this past week really weird? I think partly because I didn't work most of it. So Monday and Tuesday, that would be New Year's Day and then the 2nd of January, were both part of our winter break. So, those days I had off of work just because the university was shut down. So, so I didn't go back to work until Wednesday. And so then Wednesday was kind of, like get back in the office, get caught back up on everything, all of that. And I actually did get a fair amount of stuff done on Wednesday that needed to get done. So then Thursday, work was called off because we had a snow day because it snowed here. And like I've said in the past, Virginia just doesn't know how to handle snow. And so the university just shut down, which was probably also because their, classes aren't back in session yet. Like there's like the winter intersession classes, but otherwise like it's basically just staff that aren't coming in then. So it's, right now canceling or closing the university has less of an impact than if they did it during the regular semester. So yeah, I didn't go to work on Thursday, and then we had a late start Friday. So the university didn't open back up until 10 o'clock on Friday. So like, I kind of only worked a partial day Friday then. So it was just like a really weird week where, it's already kind of weird because, it's the end of break and you're kind of getting back to work after being gone for a while. That's the coffee maker. Sorry about that. So there's that. And then, you have a snow day, which again, just throws everything off. So yeah, it was just kind of a really weird week. Plus I've just been sort of feeling, like I said, with moving the furniture around, just kind of restless a little bit. I think probably partly because I've been at home more this week than I normally would have. So I think I'm getting a little bit of cabin fever. But I've also, I've hit the point now where I think I've lived here in Richmond almost as long as I lived in Lincoln, which was the longest I'd ever lived in one place, like as an adult. And that was when I was there for grad school. I lived there for 2.5 years, and I've lived here now for almost 2.5 years. And so it's kind of like, I think based on my past, my brain is thinking, okay, so it's time to, to leave and to move. And obviously like that is not the case for my life right now. So I think there's some of that too, where it's just like, I'm just sort of restless and all of that. And plus I know, this week has also been just kind of tough because, I think I mentioned this last week, but I have some sort of New Year's things that I'm working on. One of them being getting in better shape. I'm also trying to, eat healthier, all of those classic New Year's things. But the fact is that like all of those things take energy and thought. And I know I've talked before about like decision fatigue, which basically says that like every time you have to make a choice, you use up some of your available decision-making energy for the day. And so, and kind of like once you run out of that energy for the day, like it just gets harder and harder to like make good choices. So I know that, like, you know, the fact that I've been, you know, thinking like, don't eat ice cream all the time, like don't eat junk food, and, you know, you have to exercise today and all that stuff, definitely is contributing to a little bit of decision fatigue. And, you know, I know this logically, but it doesn't necessarily help when, like, you know, you just are completely out of energy and motivation for the day. So there's that. But yeah, what else? Oh, something exciting that happened this past week. So this is kind of a funny story. So every year for work, we have to file 2 sort of like documents or whatever. One of them is our work plan for the year ahead, which basically says, like, you know, you will be teaching these classes, and, you know, you'll be devoting this % of your time to teaching, and this % of your time to, you know, research, and this % of your time to service to the department and stuff like that. If you're really new, by the way, I work at a university. I teach physics, so that's why, you know, that's where this stuff comes from. When I say department, I mean the academic department that I work in. So, you know, it's just sort of like setting out your goals or your plans work-wise for the year. And then you also have to do a report of the previous year, right? So you say, like, okay, I was teaching these classes, and, you know, you basically list everything that you did, and then that helps the department chair to do your annual evaluation. So, you know, had to do both of those, which meant that I got an email from the department chair, who's basically my boss, about, like, okay, this is what, you know, your plan for teaching is for the rest of the year, or for this year, for 2018. So, you know, I kind of was looking over this thing just really briefly in my email, because I wasn't ready to, like, do the work plan when he emailed it to me, but I was just kind of glancing over it, and I saw, like, okay, yep, everything's as expected. Except that it wasn't, because I wasn't looking very closely at it. So there's a lab course that I teach, or that I've taught every single semester that I've been here, which is Physics 320, which is our number for modern physics. So this is the modern physics lab, and modern physics basically means physics since 1900 or so. So this is things like radioactivity, things like sort of quantum effects, stuff like that. Basically physics from Einstein to now. And so this is a lab that I've taught, like I said, every single semester since I came here. So that's Physics 320. So I thought I saw that on my work plan for this next year, and I was like, okay, sounds like what I'm used to. No, it turns out next fall I actually was scheduled to teach Physics 302. You can see why I mixed the two up, with just a glance. So Physics 302 is actually a second semester of classical mechanics. And classical mechanics is basically stuff sort of like Newton's laws and stuff like that. It's basically talking about like moving bodies. So the second semester of classical mechanics is getting into like the more upper level stuff. Like if you have like first semester of classical mechanics, you might talk about like an oscillator, which you could think of as like something attached to a spring that's moving back and forth. So then in second semester, you talk about coupled oscillators. So if I have two things which are attached to springs on either side, and then there's a spring in the middle, right? So how do those things, move in relation to each other? And describing that mathematically. Or, you do what's called non-inertial reference frames. Non-inertial reference frames are basically if you are in a reference frame which is accelerating. And how do we deal with the math of that kind of stuff? So this class hasn't been taught in years and years and years. Like I couldn't find it taught anytime in the past couple of years. But it is a course that has been taught before. I guess there just wasn't demand for it in the past couple of years. But I'm going to be teaching it again next fall. So this is super exciting for two reasons. One, because the material is just interesting and I'm excited to, dive into teaching that material. I have to like remember some of it for myself because it's been a long time since I did a lot of that stuff. But the other exciting thing is that like this is my first real class that I get to teach. I've kind of, ever since I started, I've been really kind of asking to be able to teach a lecture course. And, just with the way that my job description is, like, it's not really in my job description to teach lecture courses, which is why I primarily do the lab courses, which, is fine. Like, I understood this when I got hired for the job. Like, I knew what the job was. But at the same time, it was kind of like, but I really would like to, teach these courses. And so apparently they have finally given in. And now I get to teach my very first lecture course, which is super exciting. And especially the fact that it's sort of like a decently high-level course, you know, just implies that they have a lot of faith that I will do a good job of teaching it and that I will, you know, be able to teach it. So that's pretty exciting. Who knows, it could be that only like 2 people sign up for it in the fall, and then I have a class of 2 people. But either way, I'm just very excited about it, and I'm very sort of proud of myself that obviously I have, you know, given off the impression that like I can handle something like this, and that they, you know, are willing to trust me with something like this. So that's pretty exciting. And the nice thing too is that it will give me something to do over the summer, because I get really bored over the summers because there's just not a lot to do. But this summer I will then have to be relearning all of that material, so that will give me something to do, and I will, you know, be preparing and stuff for teaching that course in the fall. So yeah, that'll be pretty cool. Otherwise, you know, work this next week is probably going to be pretty slow, I think, just because, you know, classes don't start until the week after this next week. So, and you know, I'm pretty far ahead in terms of preparing for things, so I just don't have a lot that needs to get done, which is, you know, fine. I guess it's good to have, you know, kind of chill times before I hit, you know, the semester and all of that stuff. And then yeah, Vogue Knitting Live, which I'm super duper excited for. But that's kind of my life right now. So not too exciting. Kind of easing into the new year. Speaking of New Year's, this is another thing that I wanted to mention. So I think I mentioned last week that part of my like New Year's resolutions or goals or whatever was that I wanted to get back into doing yoga, because I used to do a lot of yoga, and then I kind of got out of it for a couple of years. And so I thought I would mention that I've been doing, like, part of getting back into yoga is I've been doing this 30-day program, which is being put out by a yoga teacher who puts out videos on YouTube, and I really like her. And her channel is called Yoga with Adrienne, and I think she's just really good. And I will link to her channel and the playlist that is, you know, that has this 30-day program being added to it each day. But she's a really great yoga teacher. Like, she has really good cueing, and she just offers really insightful thoughts, like, as you're going through the yoga. And the nice thing about this program is that it's not necessarily, like, it's not what you think of when you think of like doing a yoga practice. Like, it's not super woo-woo. Like, don't think that it's like super, you know, weird. But it's just like, it's not meant to be very like physically demanding. Like, you don't have to be flexible for it. You don't have to be strong. Like, you don't have to be in good shape. And it's just really good. And it's really well paced in a way that, like, you know, the other day I looked at what the video was. I sort of try and watch, at least glance at them beforehand, so I have some idea of what's coming. And so I kind of, you know, I watched through this entire video earlier in the day before I actually did it. And I was kind of like, I don't want to do this. Like, so I really was thinking about skipping it and doing a different yoga video. And then I got home, and, you know, I've been doing them after work, and I got home and I was like, you know what, I'll just do the one that's, you know, that I'm supposed to do today. And if I don't like it, I'll stop halfway through. But I got going into it, and I was like, you know what, it turns out this was exactly what I needed. Like, it's weird how, I mean, I guess this is what yoga teachers are supposed to do, right? They're supposed to know how to sort of pace these practices and everything. And she does a really good job of that, of sort of like, you know, each individual practice, knowing how to pace that, and also knowing for this like 30-day program, like, when to give you like maybe an easier day, even if you don't think you need an easier day. Like, once you get into it, you're like, yes, this was exactly what I needed today. So I highly recommend, if you are thinking about trying to start yoga or anything like that, I highly recommend her videos. Like I said, I will link to both her channel and to this 30-day program. Her channel has tons and tons of videos. So, you know, she puts on a lot of videos too that are like, you know, yoga for nurses, or yoga for office workers, or yoga, you know, for if you're lonely, or yoga for a broken heart, like things like that. And I mean, sometimes it can be a little hokey, like, how does this relate to that? But like, again, she offers really insightful thoughts. And so I definitely recommend it if you're thinking about trying to start a yoga practice, or if you have a yoga practice and you want, you know, to broaden it and include other sort of videos and stuff. But yeah, I think I've rambled on long enough. I'm staring at my coffee and I want it real bad, so I think I'm gonna go have my coffee while I get started editing this video, and yeah, call it a week. So thanks very much for hanging out with me. Like I said, I will see you guys again next week in some capacity, either in a vlog and a podcast or just a vlog. But yeah, I will see you guys next week. Thanks for hanging out, and have a good one. Make good choices. Bye.